who's ever had a dream and then jumped out a window. And she said, well, that happened to me. So, and I was like, that poster is designed to attract an audience of exactly one person. It's you. And I was all like, well, so you jumped through a window? And she said, and it was a 3rd-story window. She jumped through, and she landed on the fire escape outside. So it was like she should have went like, and then she was just on the other side. She didn't get hurt. And I said, so have you seen a doctor? And she said, no. And somebody put a video of this up on YouTube. And then I made her come up on stage so everyone could take pictures of her and tweet, please see a doctor. And she still didn't see a doctor. And then eventually, I just gave her all the money in my wallet to go pay for a doctor. And I still don't think she's going to see a doctor. But I'm curious, like, and then in the show after that, there was another sleepwalker. Is anybody here somebody who's a sleepwalker and has jumped out a window? I'm just curious if that's like if that's a demographic we should be advertising to more aggressively than we are. No, okay. So does anybody have any questions? I'm happy to talk about anything. Yeah.
Quick comment and then a question. So when I was 15, my high school journalism teacher used episodes of This American Life to teach us storytelling.
Okay.
And they were great.
Okay.
And so I just wanted to thank you for inspiring me and a whole lot of people. And
this is the comment part. Good.
Yes.
Got it.
And then my question is, if you would sign this for my high school journalism teacher so I can give it to her and she'll put it in the classroom.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not a, I guess that is a question. It's more of a request. It's more like you're giving me a job to do. Yeah, come on, I'll do that. Maybe somebody else have a question while I'm signing this?
Mr. Glass.
Yes.
Do you plan on making any more films?
Not like this.
Producing?
I mean, this was interesting. We do have about a half dozen films in development, but those films are being developed in much more like traditional ways where like studio money's involved and regular financing is involved, and they're much more expensive films to make than this. And truthfully, 2 of them are pretty close to a point where we can start casting and shooting. One of them is for Mark Forster to do. He did Monsters Ball and one of the James Bond movies and a bunch of other movies. Stranger Than Fiction is his film, and a really wonderful director for him to do. And the other is for Errol Morris to direct as a feature. The Errol Morris one is a dark comedy about cryonics, true story about a guy who back in the 60s was a kind of cryonics hobbyist in a cryonics club in California, and then the members of the club started dying because they were old, and I was like, well, we should start freezing these people, but it was like totally over his head. Paul Rudd is slated to star in that if we ever get financing. I know. But you can see that like that's a much more, like that's a level of film that's so expensive that, like on this film, like I co-wrote the film with Mike, and I raised the money, and I was at the set, and I was in the editing room every day, and it was just like a much more intensive kind of thing. I don't think I'm going to do that again, just because I prefer to do my day job. Like no knock against that, but I'd rather be doing radio. Yes, somebody back there?
Hi, I actually live in Cicero, and I loved your episode on Cicero.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Like mixed feelings, obviously, for the storied past of Cicero, but
yeah.
Also, I have a question. Why did This American Life leave Chicago? Is my question.
Why did we leave Chicago?
Yes.
We left to do television. We had a TV series that was on the Showtime network for a couple years, and if anybody's curious, the episodes are on iTunes. You can get them for like $1. And it just turned out it was going to be a lot easier if we moved to New York to do the TV production. And then once we were in New York, we were in New York for 2 years, and we asked to be taken off of television. We won some Emmys, and we did great, actually. We could have stayed on, but we asked to be taken off because it was hard to do both radio and TV at the same time. And then the staff basically, like the people had kids who they'd put in school, and they'd gotten mortgages, and they didn't want to move a second time. And so although I wanted to come back, I was alone on the staff, so we stayed. Yes, down here. I'll just repeat your question. This was my neighborhood in Chicago. I lived around, when I first moved to Chicago, I lived around the corner at the corner of Jansen and Waveland, and Southport was my L stop. And then I moved over to Ashland and Irving, right next door to Lakeview High School. And then I lived on Greenview and Addison, near the corner of Greenview and Addison. So I know this neighborhood really well, including all the different stores. Like when Julius Meinl came in, that story I find completely perplexing. Have you seen that story down on South Court? Like, why is there a store that's nostalgic for 1930s Austria? Do you know what I mean? Like, as a Jew, I walk in there and just feel creepy.
Hi, yeah, I'm happy that you mentioned something about coffee shops. We're both coffee nerds and work in specialty coffee, so it's like our thing. But
do you understand the Meinl thing?
Not really.
Okay.
We're very, a little bit more specialized, if you will.
What are you talking about? So you don't go to any commercial coffee shops? You only go to like weird places where you have to knock on a door?
No. That would be ideal, though, because then I could like have them all to myself and talk to them about the wonderful world of coffee. But that's besides.
You're frightening me.
I'm frightening you. She might frighten you even more. This is the stuff we obsess about, but it's a science. Anyway, my question was, in terms of taking a story that you did on the radio, how long did it take you with Biglia to flesh out the characters and sort of kind of like transfer this over to the screen, like writing this?
It took us 2 years to write it, and then once we shot it and looked at the first cut of the film, we realized that we really had no idea what we were doing, and then we spent 8 weeks basically recutting the film, and then we picked up another 8 days of shooting. And the stuff that we picked up, it was hard to figure out, for example, how to make the relationship seem real. Like, we weren't skilled enough screenwriters to do it. And we only figured it out in the edit. Like, we went back and shot a couple things. There's a scene at the beginning of the film that you'll see. It's the first scene after the prologue, where Matt comes to pick up Abby at work, and he gives her some nuts and some water, and you'll notice that the plot doesn't advance at all. And it's a scene that's just there to signify, oh, they kind of get along. And before we had that in there, people were like, I don't get the relationship. And then once we put that 38-second scene in there, everybody was just like, oh, they're such a nice couple. So I hope that doesn't spoil anything. It happens like 2 minutes into the film. Yes, over here. Yeah, you. Yeah, I'll just repeat what you said. Good for you.
I have kind of frequent, what I would call night terrors. I'm just curious if this might be able to help address the issues. I have not necessarily jumped out of a window, but been caught by the ankle climbing out of one. And I'm just kind of hoping this might help bring some...
What's your question?
If this film might help me address my screaming in terror in the middle of the night.
No, it's just gonna be this is just gonna be a movie. And so you're just gonna get to watch somebody else's experience. Have you seen a doctor?
No.
I totally think you should consider that.
Yeah. All right, well.
No, seriously, like, my friend nearly died by jumping out of a second-story window, and then I met a lady today who nearly died jumping out of a third-story window, and then in San Francisco, I met some woman in her 20s. These people are always in their 20s because they don't live beyond it. Who came up to me after a screening at the Embarcadero, who told me that she sleepwalks, has never seen a doctor, and she said, you know, remember that she was with her friend. She said, remember that time when I was staying over your house and you stopped me from jumping off your balcony? You know, in my sleep, it's super dangerous. 4% of America has we learned this on NPR this week, has morning edition, has a sleep disorder. Can I just ask anybody to raise their hands if they have a sleep disorder? Like, how much of a... We've talked about doing a special, like, 4 a.m. screening for people with sleep disorders who can't sleep. Can I ask, like, do you think that would be a funny thing that people would come out to? Are any of you guys sleepwalkers? Yeah? And if you fall asleep during the movie, what are you likely to do? And do you treat the sleepwalking? No. One of the things that Birbiglia says is that as a sleepwalker, he's always been offended at how sleepwalking is portrayed in movies, because it's always people going, and he's like, we're not zombies. Another question? On any subject, it doesn't have to be the movie. I'll answer a question on anything you want. Yeah.
Was there ever an episode that you really wanted to do, but just wouldn't work on radio or TV?
Was there an episode we wanted to do and wouldn't work on radio or TV? Occasionally that comes up, yeah. But often it's for like a very prosaic reason. Like right now, there's this woman who told me this amazing story about getting bitten by a shark. That is one of the most memorable things I have ever heard. And she told it to me. She's a stranger who I met on a train. And I cannot convince her to come on the radio, and it's killing me. I feel like it's like if she doesn't come on, I'm just gonna have to like go on and say somebody told me this on the train. It's such a good story. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes great stories happen to those who will not tell them. I have a friend, Patty, who told me this story years ago that I could not get her to tell on the radio, and it's about when she and her husband just had this idea of like, let's go to a swingers party. Perfectly happily married. They were like in their late 20s, and they're both really, really cute, and like marriage is going fine. He's like, let's go to a swingers party. And so they go to this swingers party. There are many steps to this story. But anyway, they go to the swingers party, and it's all like aging, middle-aged, paunchy people in the California hills outside San Francisco. And I was like, well, how do you know when like people want to have sex with you? And she's like, well, nobody tells you, but she says, you'll be standing there talking to somebody at this party, and this whole house was like decked out for people to have sex in, like towels everywhere. Apparently you need a lot of towels. And it's like, how do you know? And she's like, well, what will happen is you'll be talking to them, and there'll be a pause, and they'll go, so, want a party? And like whenever people would say that, they'd go like, no, no, we don't want a party. Like they knew what it meant. And so no one at the party is attractive to them, and they're younger than everybody else by like 15 or 20 years. And Patty is mocking her husband mercilessly for bringing them to this thing. And she's like, no, you go with whoever you want. It's fine with me. You know what I mean? Like she's very secure in their marriage. And into the party walks this couple, and who the couple is, it's like a 19-year-old Indian princess, like she says it's possibly the most beautiful girl she's ever seen. She's very dark-skinned, jet black hair that goes down straight to the bottom of her ass, and she's wearing a white micro mini skirt. She's like 19 years old, perfect skin, dark eyes. She's like, it was like looking at a cartoon person walk into this thing, and she's there with her husband, who looks like the aging Lyndon Johnson. And like after he was president, you get the feeling maybe he's a drunk and he's had some bad medical problems and he's portly, and he's kind of like, doesn't like, you could use some yoga, and he's like sort of lumbering, and it's the two of them. And so the Indian princess and Lyndon Johnson are looking around the party, and the only, the two most attractive people are Patty and her husband, because they're in their 20s, and so the Indian princess and Lyndon Johnson come over to them, and of course start talking to them, and they're talking and blah, 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 and it turns out that Lyndon Johnson runs like the circus, some sort of circus, that is in town in San Francisco, and it had come through an Indian reservation, and he saw this girl, and this incredibly pretty girl, and he's like, why don't you marry me, and then you can leave the reservation? And she's like, that sounds actually like not a bad deal. And so now they're at the swinger party, because I guess that's his thing. And so they're talking, and there's a pause in the conversation, and Lyndon Johnson says, so, want to party? And Patty's like, you guys just go and party. and then but Lyndon Johnson, Mark couldn't go with her husband, who will stay unnamed from the story, couldn't go with the Indian princess unless she would go with Lyndon Johnson. And that kind of put the kibosh on the whole thing. And anyway, there's other parts of the story. I could keep going on, but I shouldn't. Anyway, so there's like things like that, which will never be on the radio. Yes?